Hi everybody, I'm Zilla Blitz and welcome to Bulge Off 23 Round 2, where we continue our exploration and adventures to narrow down the 20 top World War II Battle of the Bulge tabletop board games to one champion. We're now down to 16 games, so in this video we're going to show the results from our first 4 matchups, which were quite surprising in many cases, at least to me. We'll take a look at our full 16 team bracket, and then we're going to introduce the next 4 matches. Additionally, I also want to take a look at some of the comments that came in and address those a little bit. Let's begin by taking a look at the results from our play-in matches. The goal of this round was to take our field of 20 games and get it down to 16 games so that we could set up a full bracket. Play-in match number 1 featured Battles for the Ardennes, the 1978 game from Simulations Publications Incorporated that has 4 independent scenarios that can be patched together into a campaign game, against Zilla from 2012, the Revolution Games game that features the 5-6 days of the peak of the Battle of the Bulge, small footprint, highly playable with a lot of fans out there. This one surprised me, and I think it starts to highlight perhaps a theme in this competition, because here are the results. Battles for the Ardennes with 59% and Zilla with 41%, a resounding victory for Battles for the Ardennes. Now this one was to me the most one of the 2 really surprising matches here. I thought Zilla had a chance perhaps to even win the tournament. And it does highlight, I think, a theme that we're seeing here in this first round is that the older games from pre-2000 did very well. I thought if you look at like the play ratings on Boardgame Geek and kind of, they tend to score lower than the newer games. I'm not sure why that is, but Battles for the Ardennes picked up a ton of support both in the vote and then in a bunch of people mentioning how much they liked it as part of the comments too. So there is a lot of support for this one going forward. A game that I thought Battles for the Ardennes would struggle to beat Zilla, but it looks like it's going on, and it's going on with a lot of support. Apparently a lot of you out there think Battles for the Ardennes is one of your favorite World War II Battle of the Bulge games. That's round 1. This theme of older games continuing on and winning will continue as we look at some of our other results. Play-in match number 2 features our 2 Battle of the Bulge games from Avalon Hill. The 1965 Battle of the Bulge version, which was in that family of games in the 1960s that spawned our entire hobby, and then the reimagined and re-envisioned version of that game from 1981. Now, I kind of thought this one would come out this way, but I was curious to see, because generally consensus it seems to be that the 1981 version has the better gameplay. However, there is a ton of nostalgia and positive memories attached to the 1965 version, right? So what's going to win, nostalgia or gameplay? It's fair to say that nostalgia didn't do very well against gameplay in this case, because the Battle of the Bulge 1981 version got 63% of the vote, the Battle of the Bulge 1965 version getting 37% of the vote. A clear victory for the 1981 version. I have heard a number of voices, as I was kind of putting together this field too, of support talking about how good the 1981 game's gameplay is. So it'd be interesting to see how far this one continues as it gets into the next rounds of competition. Play-in match number 3 to me was a coin toss. I had no idea which game was going to win. And the voting actually transpired that way, but our matchup again was Last Gamble from 2009, DDH Games, small footprint covering the entire campaign, and Winter Thunder from 2015 from Tiny Battle Publishing, that same type of theme, a small footprint, tiny game, has interesting novel mechanics to capture the entire campaign. I felt like going into this one, I had no idea, because they seem to be very similar games, very popular in their kind of category. No idea which one was going to come out in front. And if you watch the voting transpire over the last 3 or 4 days, this is the way it happened too, right? So at times Winter Thunder was in front, and then at times Last Gamble was in front, and it kept going back and forth till there was a surge at the end from Last Gamble that gave it 53% of the vote, and the win to Winter Thunder's 47% of the vote. This was a really fascinating one to watch, and it does say something. I wonder how candidates, the smaller footprint candidates, are going to go, because I think there is something to be said for games that play fast, play quick, and are easy to get to the table. So we'll see how the Last Gamble from DDH Games continues on in subsequent rounds. Play-in match number 4, again, to me felt like one I wasn't sure at all which way it was going to go, but if I hazarded a guess before it started, I would have picked the opposite of the way that it turned out. This one featured Ardennes Offensive from Simulation Publications Incorporated, 1973, our second oldest competitor in the game, up against Fast Action Battles the Bulge from GMT Games from 2008. Now, these are very different games. We've got a block game from 2008 against one of the original games from 1973. I was really surprised at this one. And also, one of the things that surprised me, there was a comment on Twitter from Mark Herman who said Ardennes Offensive is his favorite Battle of the Bulge game. I didn't realize there were as many Battle of the Bulge fans out there for this older one, because on Board Game Geek, it doesn't score that well. That's why it was in the play-in round. So I thought, I don't know which way this one's going to go. But the Ardennes Offensive, with 54% of the vote, to Fast Action Battles the Bulge, 46% of the vote, a clear and decisive win for Ardennes Offensive, and it will be continuing on. This does highlight, to me, which seems to be a somewhat of an interesting theme early on in the stages, because if you asked me before this competition started, I thought newer games post-2000 would do a lot better than the older games pre-2000, and that most of our winners, if you had these types of head-to-head matchups, would be the newer games over the older games. But it didn't turn out that way at all in our play-in match. It'll be interesting to see if this theme continues as we go forward. So before we jump in and take a look at our Sweet 16 bracket, I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the comments that came in. First up, thank you to everybody who's commented and voted in this series. It's really exciting to see so many votes coming in and to read all your comments about which ones you either hope are going to win, which ones you think are going to win, which ones you have and are wondering how they're going to win. This is one too that kind of sharing that from Poltergeist Board Game says, this is so exciting. I can't wait to see who wins and how far the only Bulge game I own, World War II Commander Battle of the Bulge, will go. And that's kind of how I feel in terms of watching this. It's been the first four matchups, two of them went ways I didn't think they were going to go. So I'm now very excited to kind of see how it all plays out. So I share much of that same excitement with everybody in that category, of which there were a number of comments that talked about things like that, like wondering what's going to happen as it goes forward. Another comment I want to talk about, there were actually three of these. Two of them stayed up, and every once in a while, YouTube randomly deletes comments. I don't know why. I think they think it's spam. Oftentimes, that's not me. So if you're the third person that put up an Axis and Allies Battle of the Bulge comment, that's not me that deleted it. You left out the best game, Axis and Allies Battle of the Bulge, my favorite Bulge game and favorite Axis and Allies game. This one from AJ Lynch, 123. A couple thoughts on Axis and Allies Battle of the Bulge. Yes, it's a great game. And if we did broaden the category to go into general board games about the Battle of the Bulge, I'm sure that games like Axis and Allies Battle of the Bulge would crush every game here because it's got such a massive print run. And so this contest is really focused on games that really dig into the historical conflict simulations, traditional war games exploring Battle of the Bulge. So no insult intended to Axis and Allies Battle of the Bulge, which is a fantastic game, but it really sits in a different category than these more traditional war games we're looking at that covers the battle. Additionally, there were some other comments that mentioned you left out my favorite game, you left out this game or that game, where is this game and that game? Hard choices had to be made, right? We had to limit a field that was much larger than 20 games down to 20 games. I actually wanted to start out at 16. I just found it really hard to draw the line at 16. One of the things that did eliminate a couple of games, that I wanted the game to be reasonably accessible even if it were out of print. And there were a couple that in there that I looked at and I said, okay, this is never getting reprinted. And it's like a $300, right, used. And it's like, okay, that's crazy. Like, I think Last Blitzkrieg is a game that's in here too. And it's expensive right now because it's out of print, but I can trust that it's going to be reprinted. So accessibility was a factor in there because one of the goals of this channel is to broaden the games that people play. So I wanted to include games in this that not only were iconic and good games that cover historical war games that cover the Battle of the Bulge, but people could have some chance and some hope of being able to get them without having to break the bank to do so. And now let's take a look at our Sweet 16 bracket. I'm not going to talk in too much detail of this because we're going to spend time talking about the matchups for our next round, but I'll post an image of this on the community page and then update this as the competition goes forward. Because what we're going to do now is to go down from 16 teams to 12 teams by playing the left side of this 16-team bracket. And with all that said, it is time for our next round. Let's preview the first four matches in our Sweet 16 round. We'll start off with matchup number 1. This matchup is The Last Blitzkrieg from Multi-Man Publishing, published in the year 2016, against Tigers in the Mist from GMT Games, one of our 5 games published pre-2000, this one published in 1999. Now, if we take a look at Tigers in the Mist, this to me feels like a very mid-level war game that covers the Battle of the Bulge. Very accessible. It's got 350 counters, I think 4 scenarios, including a campaign game, a couple of variants, and then an introductory scenario. Very modest rule set. Feels like a very playable game that covers the Battle of the Bulge. We've got some smaller games and some larger games. This one feels like it sits right in the middle. Its competitor is one that came up quite often as I was putting together this collection of games. The Last Blitzkrieg, 1,680 counters. Its strength, perhaps, it's got 10 scenarios, including a campaign game, 4 maps. It is a rather large game, but it's in addition to the campaign game, it's got 9 other scenarios. Some of them that use only 1 map, some of them use 2 maps, and then of course the campaign game and some of the larger ones that use all 4 maps. Battalion Combat Series is incredibly popular, and that takes it, of course, to the Battle of the Bulge. I know a number of people are keeping their eyes on this one. I'm interested to see how this goes up against Tigers in the Mist. Whichever one you think should go on to the next round, please go vote for it. The votes, again, are on the community page on the channel. Matchup number 2 is what I'm calling the Monster Mash. This is the 2 biggest games in the competition going head to head to see which one continues on. Talking A Time for Trumpets from GMT Games versus Wacht Rhein from Decision Games. Both of these games have over 2,300 counters, a large footprint, and definitely are a monster against monster clash. Wacht am Rhein is Decision Games' entry into the series. This 2012 game, again, has 2,380 counters, the most of any game in the package here. Big footprint map, and I was trying to count up the scenarios. They come in sets, and each set has multiple scenarios to them, and there's multiple sets. I mean, dozens of scenarios in the package here. Significant complexity here with rules as well for each of the scenarios and things like that too. But yeah, this is our first monster game in the competition. And we go right on to Time for Trumpets, more traditional box size, but that doesn't belay its size. It is a rather thick footprint here, 2,308 counters in it, slightly less than Wacht am Rhein. Again, this one as well has over 20 scenarios, and I think that's something that characterizes both of these kind of monster games. Monsters are often misunderstood in that, there is layers and layers of gameplay before you get to that campaign scenario. Scenarios that involve only a small portion of the maps or a small portion of the campaign. So loads and loads of gameplay. There are almost multiple games in one package categorized under that monster umbrella. But there you go. Time for Trumpets or Wacht am Rhein. Which one of the two? If you played them, do you enjoy them? Which one do you think should go on to the next round? The vote's on the community page. Matchup number 3 is our youth against experience matchup. We're bringing back Battles for the Ardennes, which was in our previous round and defeated Zilla, and it's going up against Ardennes 2, our youngest and newest game in the competition from Multi-Man Publishing. Battles for Ardennes we talked about in the previous episode, 4 scenarios wrapped around a campaign game. It's our 3rd oldest entrant, published in 1978 from Simulations Publications Incorporated, going up against Ardennes 2, which was published recently in 2023 for Multi-Man Publishing. This game takes the standard combat series and brings it to the Battle of the Bulge. However, there's a number of modifications. This is actually a reworking of the original game by the same name, well, Ardennes instead of Ardennes 2, but it reworks the standard combat series, making some significant modifications, particularly around zones of control, to bring the series to the Battle of the Bulge in a reincarnated, re-envisioned version. Which one of these two do you think should go on to the Elite 8? Go vote on the community page. Ardennes 2 from Multi-Man Publishing or Battles for the Ardennes from Simulations Publications Incorporated. Our last matchup of the day is another youth versus experience matchup. One of our victors comes back. The Battle of the Bulge 1981 from Avalon Hill Games going up against World War II Commander Battle of the Bulge 2020 game from Compass Games. Now, World War II Commander, the Battle of the Bulge, is a John Butterfield design, one of the few entrants in the series to use an area movement system. So instead of hexes, we have areas you're moving through, low complexity, high playability, fast acting game with, again, a different theme because of the area movement within the game. A lot of people have mentioned this one as they're preparing the list of 20 games, so I'm curious to see how this one does, and it's going up against, again, coming back from the previous round, the Battle of the Bulge 1981 version from Avalon Hill, of which in the older game category, I think this game got the most praise for its gameplay. as opposed to nostalgia from our group of games, the pre-2000 games. But again, sometimes word of mouth is not standing up in terms of how these games play out. So I'm super curious to see how this one in particular, with a newer game, Area Movement, John Butterfield, goes up against this 1981 classic. Which one do you prefer? It's on the community page, where all 4 of our votes sit. That brings us to the end of episode 2. All 4 of these matchups are posted on the community page on the channel. There's a link in the video description, usually a link in the first comment that I will pin so you can find where to go vote. Thanks to over 200 people that voted in each of these individual matchups in the first round. It's been a ton of fun for me to watch how this is unfolding. Looking forward to seeing how our next round goes. I'm going to let voting go about 3 or 4 days, and then I'm going to try to get the next episode out probably January 30th or January 31st. That'll keep us on pretty good track. As I'm making this episode now, it is Christmas. And so Merry Christmas to everybody who's celebrating the day. I'll put a link to the next episode as soon as it is ready. And thanks again for watching and all your support. Take care. Bye.